All right. Hello. This is a video covering Lab Rat, which is a game made by Team Squamous, which is constituted of the two of us. I am Max Lieberman, and joining me is...
David Frankel. Is it squamous or squamous?
Oh, well, that's a great start.
Oh, we
That's
should
one of
have
those
researched that.
words. That's one of those words you really don't hear said out loud a whole lot, so I'm not sure.
Well, all right. Moving on. So I'm David. I make games for work and also for fun, and hopefully there's overlap there. And and Max and I have known each other for as long as I can remember.
Yes, same. I do not make games for a living, but I play a lot of games and have always been interested in them and interested in the stories of how the games that I love get made. And so it was a real pleasure to be able to participate in a game jam with someone who had the chops to make my strange ideas an actual game. This was a blast. So how did this come about? Let's see. So Lab Rat is a small game that we created in April of 2020, right at the beginning of quarantine, which seemed like a fantastic use of time and project for the time that we suddenly all had on our hands.
Right.
And David, you had reached out and suggested working together on a game, which was an exciting surprise. So why this isn't the first game jam you've worked on. What do you like about them?
What do I like about game jams? I like making games in general, obviously. I do it a lot. I guess I just kind of appreciate them as this very interdisciplinary, interactive art. And I like game jams because it kind of pushes that creativity. You're in this kind of short, fast paced pressure cooker, and you might end up with something that is interesting and you might not have expected. Yeah, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, okay, that resonates with me. I mean, I haven't had the experience of trying to make games in a different context, but the idea of doing a creative project when you're staring at a blank piece of paper with no guidelines, no prompt, and unlimited time is very different than when you're given. It's like when you used to get a writing assignment in school, and if they would just say write something, you would sit there and stare at the piece of paper until your forehead bled. I think that's a Douglas
Sure.
Adams joke. But if they would tell you what to do, you would say, okay, cool. I know where to start and I can go any direction from there. So
Yeah. And I should say, I mean, I've also done, it's been years now, but I've done 24-hour comics and kind of comic jams, basically. And a similar idea. I also very much like, I've done these on my own, but I like the collaborative nature. There's this interesting social dynamic being thrown into or throwing yourself into this kind of intense creative situation with someone else. So that's interesting to me.
that makes sense. You had sent me a list of a couple of different jams to pick from, mostly, I think, based around maybe ones you knew had a good reputation or would get a lot of entries, but also ones that weren't happening in the time frame when we were hoping to do this because it was
Right.
over like a long weekend.
Right.
And I think I picked Ludum Dare out of that list because it seemed like the themes were always fun and they always got a ton of entries. And so I figured, well, at least the thing I work on won't be the
Yeah.
most amateurish thing that gets submitted.
There are so
And
many entries. This is huge.
yeah, so, but because I was excited about doing this, I had actually come up with some ideas of, they have like a weird process of revealing the theme where they pull back the veil and narrow down the list of themes that they start with a large list of themes. They're all publicly listed and then narrow it down day by day until they tell you it's actually going to be this one, right? Before
Right.
that, it's going to be one of these three, and before that, whatever. So before they had revealed any of them, I had come up with an idea for a game called Business Axe. And I don't remember this in great detail. The only notes I have on this are Business Axe, 3 choices, 2 business, branching scored outcomes, 1 smite, 2 endings, business score ladder, or return to land. So I think that was a game about a barbarian who somehow ends up with a corporate job and has to decide whether to try to rise through the corporate ranks or smite people instead. And then you can decide which path you want to end up on. That still sounds fun. But then once they had told us what the theme was, I came up with a couple of other ideas, and we picked from among the three. It was nice of you to let me pick the theme, because that was one of the only things that, when we started on this, I felt like I was going to be able to contribute to, since you are the artist and the coder of the two of us.
Well,
So
but
the
you're
other
a
ones,
writer. You've written. You're a creative guy. So
I know how to use words in sentences. That's true. So the other ideas that we had were lich, which is pretty straightforward. I'm kind of glad we didn't go with this. You're a lich protecting your soul vessel. I think I couldn't remember the word for, I still can't. What is it? Reliquary? No, there's this particular word for where liches keep their souls. The D&D fans watching this video, I apologize. And turnaround artist, which was this one could be interesting. It's a little arrow busy with a little satire in it. You're a CEO trying to save a series of increasingly imperiled companies by cutting jobs and jettisoning their essential identities in order to buoy the stock price. Light sim gameplay with an economic bent, and scenarios or themes pulled from like Carl Icahn type historical events. I also said, not sure what the gameplay loop is on this one.
So the theme, and I think you said, was keep it alive. So
Oh,
all
thank
of
you.
these revolved
Yeah.
around that, which,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. These three were the keep it alive. I don't think I said that. Thank you.
So, and one of
And
the
then,
things, oh, sorry, go on.
no, we ended up with Lab Rat, is what I was going
Yeah,
to say.
yeah. And one of the things I liked about all your ideas, though, is some of the entries, and not to badmouth anyone else, all the entries are creative and wonderful and snowflakes, but some of the entries, I mean, keep it alive is such a video gamey concept. You have a character, you don't want to die. I mean, any game basically could be keep it alive. And some of the games that I saw were that basically. But you really played with the idea and creatively with your pitches, so I appreciated that.
Um, I like to subvert. I like to put a little twist on things. I think it's pretty interesting to do so. I think we have a lot to talk through. We could talk more about Lab Rat and the idea there, but why don't
Mhm.
we kick off the video now so that people can watch what the gameplay looks like while we talk about the
Yeah.
process. Oh wow, this game is. I am so delighted with what this looks like. I, David, I mean, we'll talk about the process of developing it, but the experience of collaborating on Lab Rat with you was really. We started with something that looked, I thought, pretty good for the amount of time that we had on this. It was like a 2 or 3 day game jam, and it was rudimentary, granted. But then every time that I would talk to you, like every 3 hours, we would check in, and it would look dramatically better, like remarkably better, up to the point where I think in the end, the last effects I remember getting added were this pointer system telling you where to go, then the glow that you have around the objects. There's like this lighting. The
Uh-huh.
animations continually improved, and this scan line effect, which is fantastic. I guess there's like a vignetting thing, which makes it even scarier because you feel like something's around the corner.
I'm glad you appreciate it. Yeah, I like how it looks too, and I loved adding to it. Yeah, up to the point where it is now, up to the point where I had bags under my eyes going down to my mouth, but it was worth it.
You really did not seem to sleep. So the premise of the gameplay here, it's like a recipe-based sim. I think you actually you suggested that as an option for how to approach this theme. I came up with the theme of like you being a a graduate student who is subject to the whims of some bureaucratic, academic advisors, apparently the powers that be,
Right.
who were having you do things that maybe you didn't feel fantastic about in the sciences. And you said, what was the game that you referenced specifically?
Oh, uh, what did I reference? It was a recipe-based game?
Yeah, it was a recipe-based game, but it wasn't like Cooking Mama or something.
Um,
I hadn't played it.
this sounds familiar. I did reference a game, and
It's okay. We'll overlay the answer on the screen or something if we can remember it. But so you're getting these. You're going through these levels. You have different animals you need to keep alive, right? So there's the theme,
right.
and then you're getting these obscure instructions, these like not particularly clear, a little bit ominous instructions from your
Yes.
advisors with each level. And they start asking you to do things that you're increasingly uncomfortable with. So the first one that we saw was that you have to feed one of the animals your own lunch. In this one, it warns you that it says only injure yourself if necessary, which is different than be careful, full stop. And the animals that you're taking care of get progressively more dangerous, unusual. That one's a wolverine, so
Yep.
started with turtles and rats. I remember working on this and having the level progression be one of the most interesting things as someone who doesn't work on games to try and like balance, right? So we had to come up with, what did each animal want to eat? What did it take in order to put some of those things together if they weren't just a single simple ingredient like a carrot, right? And so we came up with the idea that there are tools, there are ingredients, and then there are these stations where you have to put tools and ingredients in some combination together to come up with a dish.
Oh, we lost our finger.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, we lost.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you. Yes,
there's
that
the
was
blood on the ground.
Oh, it's so good. And here's our first hint that perhaps there's something not quite normal happening here.
But yes, that's right. But yeah,
the
one
only,
of the. Oh yeah,
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so a goal for me, or something that I felt was important, was having a simple core loop that we could use to show progression. So we have this very, I mean, moderately basic thing that you do over and over. And then we have a way of kind of increasing it a little bit in each level, which you did. And you like set all the numbers and the ingredients and balanced it, which was great. Yeah, I really like how that turned out. And I kind of feel like that was sort of the impetus for that.
I thought that it would be funny to have to feed Cobb salad to some sort of extraterrestrial tentacles. Yeah, the balancing was interesting. We started with some simple spreadsheets, and then you eventually, as you got into an actual engine, it developed into editing numbers in what was a basic database embedded within Unity, right? And so we could
Yeah,
change
something
things
like
on the
that.
fly and actually see what it felt like, and that was a lot of fun. I think the only actual front end pieces of the game that I worked on were the icons for the items in your inventory and the sounds that exist within the game, both of which I used some tools that you had suggested in order to develop. I'll look up here and see if I can figure out what those tools were.
Oh yeah, did you create the sounds and was it BFXR or something?
Yeah, BFXR. And so my process for coming up with the sounds was to go through every single possible option, find something that sounded vaguely like, I don't know, like a rat squeaking, and then
Yeah.
keep clicking on randomize until it got closer and closer.
Nice. And the graphics we made mostly in Sprite, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah, you did a bunch of icons, you did a bunch of sounds, but you did all the design as well, and that's major. That's a whole thing. That's a big and important role in game development. So,
It was, I mean, I, I think it would be silly to suggest that anyone but you did the lion's share of the work in this game, but I was surprised at how much there was to do that wasn't just coming up with the general idea. There was a lot of iterating to do, and I was happy that I felt like I was sitting there doing some work and not just giving you assignments and feeling bad about it.
I think
Man, this is so
design
cool
is,
looking.
yeah, I like how that turned out too. I think design is one of these maybe the most commonly misunderstood game development role. Since it's sort of like if for an artist, like, okay, you make the visuals, for a programmer you program, but what does the designer do? And I think there's sort of this misconception that they either, like, it's not really a real role, or it is, but it's like, oh, I'm the idea guy, I make the idea and then you all make my game. But it's not. It could be just sitting in front of spreadsheets balancing numbers. It's
Yeah, there was also a surprising amount of QA to do, which
yes,
shouldn't have been surprising, but there were, as we made changes to the design and as you made changes to the implementation, there were constantly little things cropping up that some of which were like, whoa, what, how did that happen? And then some of which were sort of predictable. Like we had more recipes where the later item was a combination of like an earlier, you would, so as it is in the final game, I think like a cob salad is a whole bunch of different things that you put together. Um, but like maybe one of those ingredients is something that came from something else. Like you have to cook, you have to create diced meat, and then you cook the meat, and then the cooked meat is an ingredient for the cob salad.
right.
But having food items that were the result of a recipe being part of another recipe proved to be really difficult. Like that ended up doing weird things where the ingredients would pop back up in the inventory, things like that, or where like the scalpel would disappear because the game considered it an ingredient. And so we had to we came up with solutions for that were like, you know, just flags on the items to say, hey, this one never goes away.
Yeah.
So that stuff was fun to figure out as well. So what works well? How do we feel about the game overall?
I feel good about it. That's my short answer. So this, as we know, isn't this isn't the game jam build. I spent a few more days polishing parts of it. I redid the character art, fixed a bunch of bugs and stuff, and I don't always do that for these sorts of projects, but I did for this because I love this game. This game is awesome, and I wanted it to be the best lab rat it could be. So that's my answer.
I love it too. I'm delighted with how it came out. I think it's funny. I think it's actually fun to play. I think it's dark, which I enjoy, and I think that. But I mean, I had a lot of fun playing. One of the cool things about Ludum Dare is that, like, in order to get people to rate your game, there's a reciprocal system in there where
Right.
the more games that you rate, the higher you show up in the results for other people who also participated, and you rate each other's games across all these categories. And I played a ton of games because I really wanted to get
Yeah.
opinions on this thing that we built that I was proud of. And certainly there were some exceptional games, but I was like, wow, this our thing is really solid. Like in the universe of games that were submitted uh, to this prompt, right? We had like a fun take on it. It looks fantastic. The gameplay loop is actually fun. It's not too long, too open ended. We finished it, which is a
Yeah.
huge thing.
Yeah. It is.
Um, I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
Uh, I think I guess we talked a lot about things that do work well in it. I'll call out a thing that I think we could have done a better job of,
Sure.
which is tutorializing.
Hmm.
I think you added some great signposting within the game to direct people to where they need to go. Um, but if people didn't have a context for understanding uh, the cooking mechanic, then they were sometimes lost. And watching people not figure it out was frustrating for them and for me, while watching people who did get it immediately was a blast.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. And we have that right up in the help section, but that's not, I mean, that's not enough if you have the development time and resources to actually tutorialize things, absolutely do that. Um, I kind of wanted I wanted there to be more later. I was like, oh, maybe we could make this a game on Steam or something, but I don't think we can, given its size and given the game loop. I don't see how to expand it to something that I feel would be Steam worthy. Like,
Yeah.
just make a whole bunch of levels with this gameplay loop. That would be a bit much. Like, this is the right amount of levels for what we're doing here.
I think
So,
that's right. The
uh,
reveal, um, there's this sort of consistent narrative arc where things are getting weirder and weirder. And then you realize that, you know, the whole thing is ultimately some sort of Lovecraftian horror that you're a
Yeah.
part of, um, which I think works pretty well. We would have
Yeah.
needed to, if it was going to be a bigger game, we would need another set of mechanics. We would need some other progression arc
Right.
within the gameplay that was not just the ingredients and recipes and number of things you're taking care of keep getting more complicated. And those things would have to feed into each other. That would be possible. But the story wouldn't be the same, right? You would need to have some sort of turn where we were like, okay, now you know that things are horrible. So, like, it's time to go get those elder gods, which is really not
Right.
like, that's not within the genre. Like, that doesn't happen. You don't pick up a gun and shoot Cthulhu, you know?
Right. No, you don't. Yeah, although, now you got me thinking about this. Like, I could see there could be this, you finish this with this student, and then there's this, you play again, but you're somebody else, and it's like a year later, and like, I don't know, things are a little different. Anyway, whatever.
Oh, you
Okay,
could,
I don't know.
you could do some very interesting environmental storytelling where somebody comes into this lab and finds whatever is left of what was happening there. Yeah, for sure. There's something there.
Well, okay. But anyway, yeah, it is nice. It's a tight contained package. Oh, this goes back to things I like, but I don't know how well we planned this, but I feel like we stumbled onto what I think is very good game feel, which is a thing I care about. And I don't remember, maybe we talked about it during development, but to me it feels right to play just kind of like sliding, skidding into this station, picking up the whatever, going over here. It's all very on point somehow.
I think that was, you know, the acceleration, the collision detection, all that was you. We had some conversations about level layout, but yeah, I agree that it feels fantastic. I think we did one thing that we did iterate on was the control scheme. So it was
Hmm.
originally I think it was originally pretty much mouse driven, and then you kept adding additional keyboard affordances with each version, and that felt better. That felt like the right way to play it to me.
Right,
Um, Instead of having to like navigate with the keyboard controls and then navigate the menu with the mouse with your other hand. Like,
right.
that could be interesting, right? That's like a awkward controls. That's, you know, Katamari Damacy or something like that is interesting in and of itself, but it's not what we were doing here.
Sure, sure.
I love that we've spent the time to include like flavor text and sounds when you observe the creatures. Like, that
Yes,
sound is different than the sound of them eating.
yes,
And I'm
me
very
too.
delighted. I had forgotten some of these specifics, and I'm delighted with the fact that when you win the game, the only all that it says is "Congratulations, doctor." Like, you've gotten your PhD, you're done. Um, you're singularly focused, I suppose. You get
I,
to read into this how you feel.
I, I, I am happy with how the Rat Guy came out, and it was a very enjoyable creative challenge designing it. Though I probably could have made it more obviously a rat god from the visuals. There's there's like, if you look really carefully at it, there's like tails and claws and stuff, but they're all kind of buried in a mess of stuff, colors from
Mm-hmm.
space.
Yeah, the particle effects are, yeah, that's exactly right. It's very color out of space. I think it works. I think it works.
Okay, cool.
It was a
Thank you.
blast to work on. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think we should belabor a small game, but
sure, sure. Well, so
we're both proud of it, and I think we rightly
yeah.
should be.
So all right. So moving on then, um, I'm I'm really just curious about your overall take and experience doing this as somebody who, uh, well, as you, as somebody who had never made a game before. I don't know if you'd ever thought about making a game, but you are such an avid gamer, um, and you're just this incredibly sharp and creative guy. So what's that like?
Well, thank you. It was a lot of fun to work on this game. I'd certainly had thought about working on games before, and I mean, I had modded stuff in the past, right? Like, I was
Oh, that's right, marathon, right?
I worked on, yeah, I mean, when I grew up playing Mac games. And so Mac games, once upon a time, the Mac OS had this thing called a data fork and a resource fork. And you could go into Macintosh native programs. And so if somebody had made a game on that platform and it wasn't like ported from the PC, a lot of the resources, which were like the sounds, the text, the sprites, would often be contained within an accessible standardized format that every application on the OS let you go in and edit and look at that stuff. And I used
And
to
did
do
you
that all the
use some
time.
sort of resource edit tool to do this?
Yes, there was a resource edit tool. I have no idea why they named it Res Edit, but uh, yeah. So I mean, I think everybody who grew up playing games on the platform would go in there and do that. So anyone who grew up with the Mac remembers that stuff. So I would go in there and figure out how games are put together. And I'm sure I got a book about like programming games at some point, but I was never I never had the stick to itiveness to actually learn to code, because I would like make syntactic errors and then it would throw my code up and I would get frustrated.
Yeah.
But I did work on some like marathon levels, and I did write on a big marathon, was like a first person shooter series for the Mac in the 90s that was super popular at the time and in that space. And I worked on a big I don't know what they're called anymore, total conversion, I guess.
Hmm.
With a bunch of other people, and that was fun. But my role was mostly just writing, because that was the thing that I felt like I could contribute. Like I was not great at level design. Like I was like, "Ooh, look, I made a stairs," and the other people in the team would be like, "Great." Um, so that had been my only experience, and I mean, I jot down ideas for stuff sometimes. But this was the first time that I'd actually done like a soup to nuts. Cool, you wrote down an idea. Now it's time to figure out, is that idea fun?
Yeah,
So it was, yeah, it was hard. It
sure.
was a lot of hours.
Yeah,
It
all
was,
condensed into a,
yeah.
yeah,
It was a lot of hours where I did sleep and I did
yeah,
go to work on like one of those days during the jam. And
yeah.
David, I do not know how you found the time to do all of the incredible work that you did on it. But I mean, it was like the best possible way to dip a toe into taking an idea and turning it into a real game, because I had a collaborator who had gone through that process many times before and who had all of the requisite skills. And so it was like, anytime I could take something off your plate, fantastic, that needs doing. But
Hmm.
it wasn't like, even though we were a 2-person team, it wasn't like, oh, we don't have anybody who can do that, right? Because
Right.
you're like an absolute ringer.
Yeah, it's a great experience though. I guess one thing that um, one of the many things I appreciated about working with you on this, in addition to being a smart, creative guy who loves games, you're also you're also a grown up and you're like professional. You kind of came into it. I felt you came into it with this attitude of like you knew what you didn't know. There was stuff you didn't know. You didn't have anything to prove, um, and that's great. That's such a breath of fresh air. I've worked with people out here um, who were sort of the opposite. They'd done games before, but they're maybe more junior in some other ways, some other life ways, and that can be painful to work with. I mean, and not to disparage them. I went through that too. I probably most of us did, but um, it is what it is. So yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a a colleague who I worked with for a long time, who I have great respect for, who we were trying to solve some difficult problem, some difficult logistical or technical problem at some point, and he just turned to me and said, "It is hard to be a professional," and it's true. Like that is a set of skills that's transferable. Like in and
Yeah,
of itself, approaching things in a sort of organized way, and approaching things in a way where you're focused on doing the best work possible and working well with the team who you have is valuable. It's a valuable skill set. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a lot of what I do in my work, is like making sure that engineers know what it is that is in front of them, and making sure that we understand as a team what the product that we're building needs and what the vision for it is, and how to communicate that with the engineering leads and the engineers, and to get fantastic designs from people who are working in UX. And so, yeah, I guess I felt that was like a skill set that I was very comfortable exercising, and it proved
Cool.
useful. Like we made a, I mean, I wasn't the only one doing that. Like I think you actually are the one who came up with the punch list of like, what do we need to do? And then you were like, all right, let's figure out which of these things, because we won't have time to do them all, which of these are critical, which of these are nice to haves. And that's a good way. It proved to be a really good way of organizing the work. So Mutual Admiration Society, overall a fantastic experience. David, thank you for also encouraging us to revisit this and do a retro video on this game.
Sure.
I hope it is instructive and interesting for people who are interested in game jams themselves from any number of different walks of life.